what are the big challenges we face that we aren't talking about. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator, specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this episode where we're going to be talking about governors and strategy. Now, the two most frequent complaints, I could say, that I hear from heads and bursars about their governors are, one, that they're too operational, that they're getting involved in issues which are at an operational level rather than a strategic level, and two, they don't challenge us enough. They're too supportive, they're too almost compliant, and we need a higher level of challenge. Now, one or other of those may well apply to you. So if you are a governor fearing that that is indeed what is happening in your school and you want to avoid either of those issues, or if you are a head or a senior leader wanting to guide your governors towards helping them both be more strategic rather than operational and challenge you at the right kind of level, then this is the episode for you. I'm going to be giving you lots of top tips on how you can explain to governors and help them to understand their role in strategy. Really quickly, before we dive into the detail, I want to make sure that you make the most of the time you invest listening to this podcast. And the best way to do that is to make sure you grab a copy of my free ebook, The Strategic Independent School Leader. It outlines how to answer the 6 essential questions that will clarify your school strategy and secure its future. In the world of business, strategy can be full of jargon, but it doesn't have to be that way. This is a jargon-free tool tailor-made to help private school leaders think and act more strategically. Download your free copy today at www.consultjuliette.co.uk/ebook. Okay, so the first thing that I often hear heads and bursars say, and in fact also chairs of governors when I speak to them, is saying that they fear that their governors are being too operational and not focusing enough at the strategic level. And it's exactly the same issues as trustees of charities or board members of companies. It's exactly the same for governors. You need to be focusing on the high level strategic decisions and then checking that your school is heading in that direction, to holding people to account to ensure that that is actually being delivered. You do not need to be focusing on the small scale operational detail of your school. That is the job of your head, who you have employed as governors, and your head's senior leadership team. So the main problem I think here is that governors, or indeed other people in the general working population, don't really have a strong idea about what strategy is. And therefore it's quite hard to see the distinction between strategy and operational issues in the moment within a governor's meeting. So I think the best way to overcome this is to ensure that your governors and that your senior leadership team have a shared understanding of what is strategy. Now, this podcast has many episodes which will help you on that. And if you head over to www.consultjuliette.co.uk/podcast, you will find the whole list of podcast episodes which will help you with that. But there's one area in particular, which I'm just going to run through again here briefly, which I think is the most important area that you need to understand to be able to distinguish between strategy and operational issues. And that is my model called the 4 building blocks of strategy. So if you think about strategy as having 4 essential stages cascading down, the top of these is your vision. This is the decisions that the governors have to make about what are the underlying values that you want to live up to as a school? What is your ethos? What is your educational philosophy? What is your place in the marketplace? If you have a competitive local market, how do you sit in that marketplace? If you're competing in international boarding, what is your positioning within that market? These are all big strategic level vision decisions. It can also be to do with having a vision for the balance between academic focus and extracurricular activities or kind of education of the whole child. Any particular ethos around sustainability, around inclusion and diversity, all of these come into your vision. So these are all big picture, important decisions that the governors need to be really confident that they have had a handle in creating and then signed off on. And some of these will be rooted in the history of your school, and the governors sort of are looking at the history saying, yep, that value system is still applicable, we're going to keep with that. And other times it's about moving the school forward with society, whether it's to do with diversity and inclusion, or forward with regards to the robust business models that we now need to see in independent schools to secure their future. So that is all definitely at the strategic level, and that's what is included in the first building block of strategy, vision. The second building block of strategy is about identifying the accelerators that are already pushing you forwards. They're the things that are going really well, that are helping you to achieve that vision. And the sticking points that are holding you back, the challenges that you're facing, things that are not going so well, or challenges that you have in your external environment. So that second building block, governors absolutely need to have a solid understanding and a shared understanding of the main accelerators and sticking points that their school is facing. And it's only by governors having a fully kind of fleshed out understanding alongside the senior leadership team that you can ensure that the strategic decisions that governors are making are actually rooted in the main challenges that the school faces. So that's really important for governors to get involved in. Questions and discussions around accelerators and sticking points, or strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, however you want to put it, is absolutely strategic and therefore within the governor's realm. They need to be on top of those issues. The third building block of strategy is called the general approach, and this is also the final layer, which is at a strategic level. So the general approach is the general way that the governors want to try and overcome those main sticking points that you face. So if you were to identify 3 top challenges that your school faces, then the general approach is 3 statements, kind of a paragraph each, which is the general way that you want to overcome those challenges. To be really clear, this is not about dictating operational decision making. This is about strategic, high-level, general statements about how you're going to overcome those challenges. That is strategic. And at that point in the 4 building blocks, as they kind of cascade down, as you can imagine them kind of cascading from vision through accelerators and sticking points to general approach, that is where the governors are involved. The final building block of strategy is actually not strategy, it's actually operational. And this is your action plan. These are the actions that you're actually going to undertake this year in order to enact that general approach that the governors have determined. So this is where the senior leadership team takes the lead. And although governors absolutely will want to be looking at some KPIs, some key performance indicators around this action plan, they want to be keeping an eye on how things are going. That's absolutely relevant, that's important. But governors do not want to be meddling and getting absolutely fully immersed in the operational detail that is contained within those action plans. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how strategy works, but most importantly for this episode, it gives you a sense of where governors should be involved. So they're involved in setting the vision, in understanding the sticking points and accelerators, and in setting the general approach. They should not be involved in the detail of those action plans and just looking at the overview of how those are going and being delivered across the year. So that gives a little bit of a framework for governors, for heads, for senior leaders to see whether or not their governing body is getting a little bit too involved in the operational level. And it also informs us on this second challenge. So the second comment that I hear most frequently from heads, from bursars, from chairs of governors is that the governors are not challenging us enough. It's not that they're getting too much involved in operational details. This is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. They are sitting back, listening a lot in meetings, listening attentively, being very supportive, which of course is important, but we're not getting enough questions that challenge us to justify our decisions, to test our plans, to make sure that we actually have genuinely come up with the most robust plan going forward, the most robust strategy going forwards. And you do need to ensure that the governors actually have the ability and that the meetings are structured in a way that encourages them to question all of these things. So some tips for how that can happen. How can governors challenge a little bit more in a really constructive way? That's informed by our discussion of strategy, because as I've said, governors need to be focusing on strategy. So there are some key questions that you can ask, governors can ask around those 4 building blocks. So if presented with a particular plan for, let's say, a new project or a new idea that a school wants to take forward, which might involve some funding and some staffing and so on, key questions might be, what's the big problem we face that this is solving? So what's the sticking point that this is the general approach that's going to solve it? And if the senior leadership team can't articulate why this project is really important because it's solving a problem, then questions need to be asked about whether this is a central strategic project that should be continuing. Now, projects don't always solve problems. Sometimes it's to do with being consistent with your values. So is this project fully consistent with our values and our ethos? Another really important question, which links back to your vision stage of strategy. There can also be projects that actually don't address problems, but are around further enhancing your strengths and really going above and beyond in something that your school is already really well known for. In which case, the question can be around, is this really harnessing our strengths and taking us to that next level in terms of delivering, a innovative curriculum that includes innovation and technology, or whatever the project might be linked to. The other really important question that needs to be asked is, what are the big challenges we face that we aren't talking about? So it's asking questions around, okay, everything on the agenda, important, I get it, I support it, but what isn't on this agenda? What are we missing? Do we need to rescan our external environment or reanalyze our internal strengths and weaknesses so that we can make sure that we are talking about the things that matter? Now, up until recently, a good example about this might be governors, governing bodies, senior leadership teams, up until perhaps a year and a half ago, who had never questioned elements of diversity or inclusion. And it was almost like a blind spot, which then, because we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement, elements of young people in particular, forcing society to think about inclusion in a more practical way. Like, what does this actually mean for young people in their day-to-day lives? That has then forced schools to think about these questions in governors' meetings. What are the other big things that we're not talking about as governors that we need to be focusing on to ensure the future of our school and ensure that we're doing the best by our students, our pupils? The other way that you can ask questions and challenge them, it links to my 5 elements of strategic thinking. Now, I don't have time to run through all of these now, but you will find on that web link that I gave you earlier, also linked to in the episode notes for this episode, an episode where I talked about strategic thinking skills and the 5 elements of strategic thinking. But questions around, how might this decision play out over time? Might this particular project have unintended consequences for other parts of the school? So systems thinking. Can we leverage this project more to solve another problem as well? Again, thinking about systems thinking. So using those 5 elements of strategic thinking to create lists of questions that you can ask, which even if you are not, as a governor, an educational specialist, you have a solid enough understanding of strategy and of your role as a governor in testing and making sure there is a robust strategy in place. Finding these questions that you can ask and even having them jotted down on a piece of paper that you have in front of you at each meeting, because these questions can then be adapted depending on the topic that's being discussed at that moment. It can be a really useful way of thinking about these things. So hopefully that has helped, both if you are a governor yourself and you want to up your game, if you like, in these governing meetings, or if you are a chair of governor or head or bursar and are trying to encourage your governors to think more strategically and to focus on strategy rather than operational, and to challenge you in an appropriate way. Now, it can be quite tricky sometimes to lead a group of governors on a journey, if you like, a culture change, which enables them to act in this more strategic fashion. And in actual fact, that links through to the topic that I was talking about a few episodes ago about strategy away days. So do look back at that. Strategy away days were a fantastic way of educating and training governors around these issues. And even if you're not doing an away day, there's various different trainings and so on that I undertake for governors and senior leadership teams, which help them to understand strategy better, understand strategic thinking skills better, and therefore improve the quality of the discussions that are happening in their regular meetings. So if any of that is of interest, do reach out. I'd love to have a chat with you. My contact details are also on the episode notes. So that's it for this week. Have a strategic week ahead of you, and I look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye then. Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.